Okay.
Okay, having said that, shall we get started?
Yes.
Okay, the first thing we need to do is approval of the meetings, the minutes of the August 27th meeting.
I so move.
Okay, any discussion? Okay. Do I hear a movement? Yes, second. I just heard a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. What I wanted to do is do a very quick update from the various task groups on where they are, not an extensive thing. I know that it's been very challenging. In many cases, we haven't been able to accomplish what we had very optimistically put in our last quarterly report, but I think we ought to document where we are and shortly, but not tonight, and we'll follow up later with some of the thoughts about where we're going. We're going to have a discussion tonight about the process and where we need to go in order to move forward on this. So from the top, climate change, and that brings up an interesting question. Erica, you sent out an invitation to Sharon Chapella?
I did.
Okay.
Oh, yes. I wonder if she was on that email exchange earlier. Let me take a look.
Could you do that?
Yeah, I'll make sure she has it.
Okay, if she comes on, we'll talk about it. But
Yeah, she's on that. She CC'd on that last email. So she should have seen the emails going back and forth.
okay. Okay, but she's on the invitation they just sent out, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay,
Yep,
good.
she is.
Okay, Sharon has expressed interest to Kia in joining on the climate change task group. She has a great deal of experience and interest in climate change over and above what's been going on with municipal vulnerability and others. She has a broad perspective, done a fair amount of research into it, and has a strong background in it, and was interested in joining as a minimum the climate change group. And I would be interested in seeing her join the steering committee. So we can, if she comes on, we can talk a little bit about her interest and perspective. I did send her the task plan, and she said she would be able to comment on it. So let's wait until she gets on or come back to it. Mary, Cultural and Historic Resources.
Yeah, the group met a couple weeks ago and then followed up with the Historical Commission on a couple of things, including local historic districts and demolition delay bylaws. Also, the library has just become a member of Digital Commonwealth, which we've been looking at. So I need to touch bases with Kelly to see how that's going to work for the town.
What is Digital Commonwealth?
It is, all right, how do I explain that? It's a nonprofit that will digitize documents, images, whatever. I believe it's affiliated with the Boston Public Library, but that I'm not sure of. But it is something that, you know, we've been aware of, but now we're going to learn more about it.
Okay, it is incidentally an amazing resource. They have equipment to very, very accurately digitize a wide range of documents in a very, very short period of time. We're using them at Old Sturbridge Village in our archives, and it's been tremendous.
So they could be used by the town to digitize some of their old stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. And I think up to a certain point, it's free. Beyond that, it's a very nominal charge.
Okay.
Okay, economic development, I have zero to report. I haven't met with them, and I won't meet with them probably for the next month. The original idea was to go out and survey business owners. Some of that got done. certainly not to the extent we wanted. We used the EDC list to do that, which incidentally, we're also using Erica as the basic list for outreach. Penny's going through that. And
Okay.
if you have current updates on that, I know it's a year and a half old or something.
It is, yeah.
That would be kind of useful. And the trick there is determining which ones are DBAs and which ones are, I wouldn't say legitimate businesses, but are significant businesses who would be stakeholders in this whole process. Okay, housing, we'll hear a lot more about housing, but Sasha, you want to very briefly, you guys have
Yeah,
met?
sure. No, very briefly is we've met a couple of times, once in person and then a couple times on Zoom and phone calls and stuff like that. And we're ready to present, and we've got like our baseline analysis done, and we're moving forward with like, let's figure stuff out from there.
Okay. Erica, land use?
To be honest with you, I haven't made significant progress on this. I do anticipate trying to put together a meeting with the task group in October. Really, the last couple of months, what I've been doing is just trying to get a better understanding of what we have in-house for GIS data layers. It's pretty complex and complicated, particularly for me because I don't have a huge background in GIS. I took a GIS course like 20 years ago. So I'm trying to just get my legs beneath me. And I've met with assessors. I've met with Rebecca. And we have two different forms of GIS. We have the online GIS through a particular company, and then we have our desktop GIS. So I'm just trying to understand all of the information that we have. Today, I've started to put together a list of all the existing data maps that I think we'll need. And at that point, that's when I want to bring the entire group back together, go through that, kind of fine tune that, and then maybe reach out to the entire group to see if that's a good list or not. So that's kind of where we're at.
Okay. Along those lines, I think our little water and sewer organization was relatively surprised when you went back to the GIS. I guess Rebecca went back to the GIS organization in Boston and asked them for the basis for which they had developed the layer for aquifers. And the answer was, we don't know, which I found very surprising that somebody didn't have some sort of link to the primary source data, but they don't. Okay, municipal facilities and services, Patty?
Yeah, I've seen, Kelly and Bumper, and I was working with the DPW until that changed. I've got a lot of information on the buildings, but there's more I need to get. I've got Don, the fire chief, and eventually the new DPW person. I met with Leslie at the DPW, but she's only in on 2 days, and gave her a list a mile long of things I need to know, and also the stuff about how much the dump is costing us, how much recycling is costing us. But as she said, she's got her hands full because she's trying to keep the place together. So I haven't gone back and bothered her, but hopefully in the next month or so, things will calm down. So
Okay.
that's what that is.
Yeah, over and above that, I'm kind of interested, and I'm not sure where it falls. And it may be in sustainability and global climate change. As a subset is, where does our trash go?
Yeah, well, that's one of the questions on the thing, but also
and
the
what does
cost.
it cost to get it there?
I mean, it started out years ago not costing us anything. They were paying us, and now we're paying for everything.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, open space and recreation. Ed isn't around. Ken, do you know where that stands?
There's really nothing new that I'm aware of. I think he's still working on some of the parks items, but I have not gotten any recent feedback from him. So we'll report the next time.
Okay, thank you. Brian, population?
Nothing new on population. Do you want me to cover finances while I'm at
Yeah,
it?
while you're at it.
Yeah. So
Waiting
just
for the census, right?
yeah. Yeah. So for finances though, Ken and Bob and I worked on an initial draft of like a FAQ document on taxes, and then now we're reaching out to a slightly wider group for input, including folks at the town hall. And then what we'll do is we'll share the draft with the full committee. And ideally this document would be something that we can either convert into like a newspaper article or put it on the website, but we're trying to tackle a lot of the questions that residents appear to have based on the survey.
Which are practically infinite.
Yeah.
Not a lot of knowledge of taxes.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody who's helped with that so far.
But you've done a good job.
Yeah, it's a great write-up.
Yeah, it really is good.
It
And you know how critical I am of finance stuff, so.
raised my knowledge almost infinitely. I thought I knew a little about it.
But I thought the greatest thing is that we're paying 0.064% to borrow money. Now that ain't bad, guys. That's pretty impressive.
That's amazing.
You know, they're giving it to us practically.
Switch my kids' mortgages into bonds. Okay.
But you have to have AAA rating.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, forget it. Public outreach and communication, there have been a lot of activity. We've put together articles. We've got as Megan, you can talk about it, and Abby. It's going out on social media. I don't know if you want to talk about that. And Kia has put together a very nice write-up on the survey that's been reviewed, and that'll go out. And I want to talk about that shortly, about the whole process of getting information out on various elements, information that people need to know about as they move forward and better understand where we're going with the master plan. But Abby, you want to talk about that? Megan?
Yeah, so basically we're, since the big summary went out on the website, that's linked. And so that's linked on the Facebook now. And then as we have these more little TED Talks, like today we have one on housing, then we'll do a post for Facebook with a little graphic about that linked to the website. And so we'll just keep doing a few of those. I think we're doing houses, taxes, and then transportation is our order right now.
Okay. Next. Sorry, I'm looking paper instead of my screen. Schools, nothing, I would guess, Penny, right?
Yeah, no, I haven't even bothered to try. I mean, I think they're still in the weeds.
Okay, and where we are with the survey is running practically hand in hand at this point with public outreach and communication. Molly, you want to talk about that? I can't see you, but I assume you can hear us.
Molly, you're on mute.
Hello, Molly.
Just one thing, I thought we had agreed to do taxes, housing, and then transportation for the stuff we were gonna put out.
Yeah, that's something I want to talk about as we get into where we're going with TED Talks and the whole process of publications.
Mhm.
Okay, well, we'll skip over the survey, but
Could I just mention something about the survey?
right.
I actually met with somebody recently who works at a university, and she was going to look to see whether there might be any resources that we could use for free to try to process some of the qualitative data that's in the survey. And so I think she'll be reaching out to maybe Erica or Molly. I gave her their names if she is able to get a resource, because that would be great, because there's so much really interesting information in the comments.
Yeah, there certainly is, and that's a very tough thing to summarize and categorize. Good. Let's see, Ken, transportation improvements.
Yeah, we had a meeting today with Mart and our COA people, as well as with Lancaster and Stowe. It was quite interesting. It's kind of deja vu in a way, though, because what Mart is suggesting to COAs is that they implement a centralized dispatch. And so it's the same kind of feedback that we got back in the 70s when the town wanted to regionalize the dispatch. for the police, and that went on for 10 or 15 years before they finally did. So I don't know whether it's actually going to lead to anything, but there's going to be a follow-up meeting with the COA and with Lancaster to explore more cooperative things, and it may or may not lead to something in Mart. And so that's
It's also
what we've been
understanding.
doing lately. Mary, is there anything else you wanted to report?
No, that's,
So,
It's also really understanding what Mart really wants to do and how they want to run it
Oh, yeah.
and how effective it will be.
yeah, their idea isn't a bad one, which is that they can get more efficient utilization of the vans that are working if everybody surrounding it knows what the other vans are doing and what their needs are. The problem, at least as our folks expressed it, is that there is personal involvement between the dispatcher and the clients, and also between the driver and the clients. And they're afraid that that will go away if you centralize it, which is certainly possible. So that's one of the things that they would look at. One of the good things that Mart mentioned that I think is worth our trying to move forward on in this plan is that they emphasize the fact that there are no hours restrictions on the van, and there's no restriction on the use of the van for community purposes.
right.
And
Well,
so if we can get to the point of actually, just having a well-run operation for it all, we have the possibility of using it for a lot more than it's used for now, and actually being a service to even more people than just the COA. And I think that would be really great if it could happen.
But Ken,
Yeah.
that's part of the arrangement with the selectmen and Don and the COA. I mean, we had to negotiate more hours and get it approved, and they were agreeable to what we wanted to do.
Yeah, I
But
understand.
it isn't just, you
No,
can
I
go
understand.
use-
Oh, I know it would need improvement. It would need
And-
approvals, but
And I think,
Okay, I don't want to debate it here,
okay,
but
no, it's
let's,
not a debate. I'm just pointing that out as a good thing that our group is working on.
good, no, that's great. And I'm sure as there have been with the police and centralization and joint arrangements, pros and cons, and it's going to be interesting to hear very specifics about what they are in order for us to make a recommendation, if in fact that's what we want to do. Okay, water and sewer has made some progress. Mark's on here. We spent a lot of time looking at potential water sources and where things might be tapped for either an emergency shelter, an emergency facility, dare I say shelter, as well as what we might do for a much broader use of water in Bolton, if in fact we start running into water resource problems. Aquifers, at this point, we have a pretty good idea of where they are. We've talked to a number of drillers. We've gotten anecdotal and are about to get some fairly quantitative information. The other side of that is, of course, the cost. What would it cost to put together either a region of the town or the whole town in a public water supply? And we're looking into that parametrically as well. And I'm absolutely sure when those numbers come in, there are going to be some very raised eyebrows, because it's not a matter of just putting some pipes in the ground. The infrastructure required is very, very extensive and very expensive. The other side of that is the sewer side. That it appears at this point that based on current technology, things have changed dramatically over the last 15 years. And the whole issue about town center going on to a public sewer system is no longer a valid argument. It appears, and we've kind of demonstrated that, I gather, with at least several houses on Main Street, that with the current technology and the available land, it's simply not a problem anymore. Chris Slade is back in the saddle, and he's in the process of putting together that. And in parallel, again, it comes back to the technology and the rationale, but the cost associated with that. And we're looking into a way of parametrically in developing what the cost might be, again, on either a regional, meaning Main Street, or a townwide sewage system, which again, the price is dare I say, extremely high. And then there's the whole question in both cases, both the water and sewer, of how does one go about incorporating a sewer district? How does one assess people who use it and probably people who don't use it? So that's going to be a very interesting result. In addition to that, Kevin O'Brien is putting together an overall outline of what our end result is going to be, or what we're focusing on to get to an end result in the water and sewer side of the master plan. So that's where that stands. Okay, what I would like to do, just so we keep our sponsors aware of what's going on, is to put a much briefer quarterly report together, basically summarizing where we have, what progress we've made in the quarter, regardless of what our goals were. And then I think we need to think quite carefully about realistic goals going forward and the process that we're going to use to get there. Maybe I ought to jump ahead to that. Brian, you want to talk a little bit about the various emails that we've shot back and forth in the last couple of days about bringing, or at least developing a process to bring the master plan to closure?
Sure. Yeah, so specifically, one of the things we've been talking about is how to convert some of the good work that's being done into actual components of the master plan. And so one of the ideas that we had was, after each of these little TED Talks, we could try, after the group presents, we can try to take the following month to convert the material that they presented and other material into a draft of a section of the report that deals with that topic area. So that was one thing that we had considered. And then another thing that we had talked about was creating sort of a basic template or outline for what each section should contain. So obviously there's going to be some variation based on the topic area, but we should have a relatively consistent format. And then the other thing that I really think it would be worth us discussing as a group right now is our approach to actual writing. So, I think one possibility would be that each task group decide how, like, who's going to sort of be the writer for that task group, or who the group of writers will be. But another approach would be to actually have a relatively small committee or sort of writing team of people who would sort of work across all the task groups, and their focus would be on the writing, so that there's sort of a consistent voice and some greater visibility across the different sections. So I don't know if people have preferences about those things or concerns. I'm happy to share my personal views, but I don't want to bias the discussion. So,
Oh, bias away.
what were you
No,
gonna say,
I want to
Mom?
hear. I want to hear what you have to say. But are you looking
Yeah.
for it so that it doesn't sound like 3 or 4 different people wrote it? Because I've definitely read protocols and very lengthy documents, and you can definitely tell, not just by the fact that the fonts are different, but the styles are extremely different. So you're looking basically, I'm assuming, for someone to write relevant sections and then other people to come behind and kind of make it sound like it's one author, not 20. Am I right?
Yeah, so what I'll call the writing team model, what I had in mind was, well, first of all, I don't even know how many people on the steering committee are interested in writing. But let's say that there were maybe 4 or 5 people that were really interested in writing because they like to do that. Then I would say that that writing team would basically work across all of the task groups to get the information from each task group, but then the writing team would really do the bulk of the writing so that it had a pretty consistent, like authorial voice to it, like what you were saying, Molly. The other approach, I would say on the other side of the spectrum, is to just have each task group write their section and then submit it. And the reason why I tend to prefer an approach where there's fewer, I guess, pens in the mix is that my concern is that if each task group is writing a pretty big section without necessarily having insight into what the other sections are saying, there could be a lot of redundancy or missed opportunities to just combine stuff and have it make sense. So, but that's kind of how I feel. I think the fewer people actually writing, probably the better, but
I think that also the one thing is that some people write well and some people don't write well. Some people are overly verbose and some people are succinct and direct. I would rather see the writing team being one of the on the side that doesn't write that well. I can pull the information, but I don't write that well.
I'm
Except for 2-year-olds.
a science writer, so I write very black and white, in fact. So I don't know if you want me, I'm happy to help edit. But I mean, I've written protocols before, but I'm very much science, and I do not like verbose, to Penny's point. And it's very direct. So that's how I write.
Yeah, I guess my feeling is it needs to be something of a combination, that the template needs to be fairly clear about what the writing team needs in order to put it together, so that we have a certain degree of consistency there, and perhaps a little bit of guidance on the level of detail that would be required. And then have the writing team take that. And again, to Brian's point, make sure that we do have the right combination. We eliminate redundancies, or we reallocate elements of various tasks or elements of the plan as is appropriate, looking at it from a big picture perspective. I too, Molly, am an engineer and science writer, and it's I would not be part of that team.
But also, you know, that each task group could sort of take a first shot at the information,
Oh, yeah.
not just
Right.
send a list of stuff. And they can take the first shot and let the writing group have at it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that, you know, you have people on here who are the experts, like, you know, Stasha with the housing and, you know, other people with sewer and water and climate. They're the experts, they're the resident experts, and they should be the ones who write it first. But I think definitely there should be people behind who can edit and, to Bob's point, reduce the redundancies. And, you know, like I said, I'm very technical and I can see redundancies and I hate them. So I can do that part, but I'm not necessarily sure I want to do the actual writing. I can definitely come behind and clean up.
Well, one way of dealing with the combination is to put together a reasonably good outline of what the expectations are with the individual groups, but then put together actually one of the tasks, write it up so that people not only understand what should be there, but get a sense of the degree to which they're expected to go in developing it, so that when it gets to the writing team, it comes out reasonably consistently. Not necessarily the way the writing team wants it, but consistent in terms of their expectations of what is to be given to them. So it'd be great to have an example.
Maybe we should make Brian the guinea pig and get him to
I'm
do facts.
I'm happy to work with him on that. I sort of did what he's talking about on the most recent open space plan, because I remember reviewing some stuff in a fair amount of detail. I mean, editing it and really rewriting some things because whoever wrote the thing got really carried away and was making outrageous statements and other things of that sort. And so, I'd be happy to be on the writing team and work with Brian on that, and we can create a detailed outline, and we can create a sample even for people to see either way.
And I think you need Molly too, because I think Molly.
That's fine. That's fine.
She writes well.
Thank you, Penny.
I wouldn't mind being on the team, maybe not as a primary writer, but as a person to help you formulate the whole thing to make it more user-friendly and
Yeah, I was going to think you might be good for that since you do that for a living, right?
yep.
Yeah, I just did a really great job on the survey write-up.
Yeah, no,
All right, well, that's,
good idea.
that seems like a good team to me.
I
Brian
didn't
has
hear the
connected.
team. My thing froze up. I'm worried that this is going to happen during the presentation. What was the plan? I'm sorry.
A team of Brian, Molly, Ken, and Kia to be the overall in charge of the writing and editing.
Got it. Thank you. Sorry.
Mind you, Brian hasn't said anything, so that's always a little.
Oh, I was just listening. Everything sounds good, and I was thinking that to this idea of like coming up with sort of an initial model, maybe we could focus on the transportation task group because you guys have already presented, and work over the next month to try to come up with what a section ought to look like, and then distribute that.
Yeah, that would be really nice.
Works for me.
Okay, so it sounds like we have the team and we have the sequence of events. A model first, and then that gets out to the individual task groups. And then we start putting together on that basis. I think the task groups need to communicate at least with the writing team early in the game so that there's feedback and understanding. As shown by the initial products that they put out. One thing that I didn't mention that I think is important, speaking of going from TED Talks into developing not only the elements for the master plan, but publications. And one of the things that we discussed in the public outreach and communication task group meeting, the most recent one, was publishing things, communicating things that were indicated as being very high priority and for which there is not a great deal of knowledge in the community. And the feeling was that rather than jump right into transportation, that we ought to think very seriously about getting taxes out and getting housing out as quickly as possible. And frankly, I concur with that. You know, I went back and read over it and looked at the comments, and it's very clear to me that both of those areas are not understood. There's not a great deal of knowledge, and there were a lot of questions about both of them. So, thoughts on that?
I agree with Bob.
Yep,
that's fine.
Okay, so.
I have a question.
And so, Stasha, we're looking forward to your presentation.
One of the things that Mary reminded me of this afternoon when we were exchanging emails about this subject is the importance of the public input. So before we really finish writing anything, and in a way, even before we finish outlining stuff, we really need to start getting public input. We need to start getting feedback from the public on these subjects. And I don't know what the best way to do that is, but I think we need public input before we finalize any recommendations or anything.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that would be crazy to make recommendations without public input.
Right, but that's...
And it's, it's going to be a very challenging situation. But having mentioned that, we had an interesting round of discussion with MAPC a couple of days ago. If you recall, we had put together an application for technical assistance to MAPC a mere 90 days ago, for which they were going to provide an answer in 30 days. That would be 60 days ago. And we finally got an answer back day before yesterday that, golly gee whiz, there have been a lot of new priorities as a result of COVID, and we really don't know what our project and funding priorities are. So the Ralph Wilmer, who is the funding guy in MAPC, the chief planner, was going off this week, and I haven't heard back, to talk to the executive director to determine what the funding priorities would be. But given that, he didn't expect that they were going to be able to give us an answer for another 60 days. However, that's the bad news. The good news is I subsequently had a conversation with Lizzie Goebel, who is the project manager for our area and gets very heavily involved in public input. And she volunteered that she would put together a Zoom with a bunch of us with Emily Torres Cullinane, who is their senior chief person for public outreach and communication, to talk very specifically about that. You know, how in this environment, and they're doing that continuously now, lots of other people are in the same boat, to talk to us about innovative or practical approaches to getting public input under these conditions. So I will follow up with her, with Lizzie, and get a connection to Emily and coordinate a Zoom meeting with whoever would like to get involved, because I think it involves the entire steering committee, not just public outreach and communication, to get our heads together on with their input. And she is a very serious technical consultant, and see where we go from here. And this will all be free, you know, at least until we get better information on our TAP funding. So that's the news on that. But I absolutely agree that we're certainly not going to go further until we have further public communication and input.
I'm bowing out. I have to go out to another meeting, so please
Okay.
continue. And
Zoom on,
I'll get minutes from the recording.
Yep. And incidentally, I find that very handy. I'm recording personally all of the task group meetings I attend, and that definitely helps with the notes and the action items. Thanks, Ken. Okay.
Erica, did you have a question?
I did. It was just a minor question, Bob, when you were talking about communication and outreach in the mini TED Talks. Is the intent for me to put the mini TED Talks on the town's website?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'll do
No,
that.
I mean, well, I'm sorry, that was a pat answer. Certainly they're going to be part of the recording, right?
They're certainly part of the recording, but I could shorten it and put it on as one of the video, you know, because we have a link for videos, and it might be something, you know, people could.
Yeah, can you edit it out?
I believe so, yeah.
That'd be great, because if you could edit it out and have the video of that particular portion, and then also the presentation material, the PowerPoint.
That sounds good. I can do that. Yep.
And have both of those so that we have, you know, context and we have the hard copy. Pardon the expression.
Okay, and I assume that's kind of what Abby was talking about with Facebook postings.
I would guess.
We could post that. Okay, I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, the more of that kind of thing we get out, the better off we are. And it's to have real people talking about it. In the case of a TED Talk, I think that really engages people more than death by PowerPoint. I don't mean that, Stasha. It's very important. But I have spent a lot of my career in death by PowerPoint. Okay, Stasha. Have you gotten a hold of Mark?
Oh, I can do that right now. Are we there? We're ready?
Oh, we're ready, and it's 8 o'clock. It's actually 3 minutes past.
Okay. We started late, so I told him to hold off. Okay.
Didn't realize how efficient.
Let me just let him know. Hopefully he'll be able to. Oh, he might not have the new link though. Erica, could you send that to him? Awesome. I'm gonna just tell him new link coming.
While we wait on Mark, do you mind
Yeah.
if I just
Please.
go back to the topic of the writing? Because I want to apologize. Sometimes things that are in my head, I don't always make explicit. So I want to be clear that the point of starting to write now is not at all because we feel like we have answers or public input yet. Like I don't want anybody to think that any of these task groups is going to be able to have a final draft or that like that was our expectation. It's more that we want to try to make sure that we're taking the momentum from the TED Talks, converting it into some form of a draft, especially on like the status quo. And also, I think that the process of writing and trying to put together a draft will actually help sharpen the approach that we want to take when we have outreach to the public, because we'll have a better sense of like, wow, in order to write this up, we really need to get input on these things.
Yep.
So I really don't want anybody to think that anything is a foregone conclusion, at least in my opinion.
No, I think it makes sense because wasn't the last one like hundred and something pages long? So that takes a lot of time to write. So I think it's prudent to start
Good
now.
idea.
Very prudent.
Well, in addition to that, I think, yeah, we need a lot of public input, but at the same time, I don't think we're where we need to be in terms of evaluating the potential opportunities moving forward to even get reflection by the public. And I think that's the next step. We're doing pretty well on the status quo where we are now, and we have a fair amount of input on things that we could do and opportunities to do it, but fleshing that out and getting to the point where we're able to bounce things off the public intelligently and get their feedback on specific recommendations or alternative that could become recommendations. We got some work to do.
I also think that it's going to be important for us to do some research about other towns. I mean, I hope this isn't a total, inward looking report. We are facing a lot of the same problems other towns are facing. And it would be good. I mean, we don't necessarily have to write this up in the report, but in some cases we do need data from other towns or data from the region, how we are compared to our region. And, I think that's going to be important in educating the public that, we didn't just come up with these topics ourselves. We're grappling with a lot of the same things other towns are working on, and in some cases we like this town for that problem and this other town for another problem, and that overall, I'm a firm believer that eventually we are going to be solving some of our problems regionally. And face it, long term, these towns are too small to grapple with some of these problems. So I think.
Well, that's good, but Kia, I hate to interrupt you, but that's what MAPC is all about.
Yeah.
And I think and not just MAPC, but MRPC, which is, we're
So
kind of
can we
split in the
ask
middle.
them for data? Can we
Sure,
just go to them
absolutely.
and get, well, okay. I mean, I don't know if the writers are going to be doing that or if we're going to ask
No,
specific groups.
I think the writers may do some of that looking across, but
Yeah.
I think it's the responsibility of the individual task groups to look at their particular area of interest and reach out, and I'll be glad to coordinate, and Erica I'm sure will as well, with MAPC to identify the information that they may have and perspectives they have on what other towns are doing. But I think it's much more efficient to go through Lizzie and Mark Drayson or
Okay,
whoever.
That's great.
Yeah. But they have tremendous amounts of information.
Yeah, great.
Bob, I would just add to that too. MAPC does have a website called Data Common,
Right.
and that has a lot of information on it as well. And I think for the most part, they do post a lot of their reports that they put out.
Yep.
So I can send that.
Yeah, can you just send that out? I have looked at that, but you're right. That's a great resource. But again, if you have questions, then we can go back and in 60 days, we may get funding. They're pretty business oriented when it comes to handing out services. beyond a certain point. Okay,
All right.
Sasha,
Can I
Mark.
share my screen? I didn't want to share before. Let's see.
Go
Before
ahead.
you guys are done talking. Okay, cool. Let's see how this is gonna work. And then I'm gonna go. Where do I want to? I want a slideshow. That's what I want. Nope. Slideshow? Yep, from beginning. There we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yay. All right, cool. First and foremost, super kudos to Erica Uriarty and Mark O'Hagan and Chris Rogers, who this would not be possible without. And I learned a whole bunch through this process. And anyway, their depth and breadth of knowledge was invaluable. So thank you guys so very much for that. So what you're going to see in this presentation is a current snapshot of our housing status in Bolton and some of the issues that we need and needs that we hope to address in the near future. So mostly present day and a little bit future talk. Let's see, now I have to advance a slide. There we go. So we thought we'd start off talking about the current housing market, which is really good right now, despite everything going on. It is a seller's market. There's low interest rates, there's low inventory, which is driving up prices. Nationally, the market has surpassed its pre-pandemic levels already. And it is, I think it's worth noting the pandemic influence on everything right now. Not only in the market in the sense that the spring rush or the spring housing season got delayed because of quarantine. And so now we're realizing that in July and August instead of in, say, April, May. Beyond kind of the timing of things, people are working and learning more out of their homes. Space is becoming a more desirable thing. And so, frankly, our community is becoming more of a desirable thing. So if you look at this chart, and I will be super fast about it, what you're seeing is this is just a snapshot of last month. So, it's our district. And you've got, let me see, does my little pointer work on here? I guess it does. Can you guys see the pointer?
Yep.
All right, cool. Yep. So, you've got your, August 2019 numbers, and then you've got your August 2020 numbers. And so you can see the lack of stock here, and then you can see the days to offer. So it's the houses are going quick when they come on. And then you can see this is the delta of last year's prices to this year's prices on average. And so everything is also increased in price. So these are some of just the major things that are happening in the market right now as we move forward with the slides. So that's the snapshot. And I'm going to give you an affordable housing snapshot next, but before we go into affordable housing, I wanted the snapshot. I wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page with what affordable housing is. There are really two types of affordable housing. There's a capital A affordable housing, and then there's a lowercase a affordable housing. And your capital A is it's regulated by DHCD, which is, there's government regulations on it. It's, on subsidized housing inventories, there's income requirements, it's monitored, and that is your capital A regulated housing. Then you've got your lowercase a affordable housing, which is more just like what you can afford. It's I guess there's a general definition, you're not paying more than 30% of your income for your house is basically a general rule in the housing market, but that's the baseline for your lowercase a affordable housing. There's no regulated sales cap, and it's just frankly housing that people have the means to pay for. So as we're going forward in this presentation, we're focusing more on the lowercase a affordable housing because we have a housing production plan committee who has put together an amazing plan for us moving forward, and that is coming out to the public in sometime this fall and will be available for review, and that's focused more on the capital A affordable housing stuff. So lowercase a affordable housing, moving forward into the presentation. Here we go. Okay, so in 2020, our lowercase a affordable housing stock in Bolton is extremely low. It is historically fairly low, but it's really low this year. Of the 72 homes sold to date this year, 5 homes were sold under 400K. And that is not an arbitrary number. That you can see there's a footnote down below that it kind of explains how we got to that number, but that's really what's would be considered lowercase a affordable housing, taking into consideration that 30% of your income going towards your housing needs. And so the average days to offer on those homes was 10 days. So they're going quick and there's not very many of them. And then this is what you're seeing underneath that is just historically the stock and the ratio of really the percentage of how much is available in that snapshot. So moving on, sorry, I know we're going too slow. So our existing housing stock, so pretty much in 2010, that was our census. We got our number 1,729 year-round housing units. We looked at the last 10 years of permits, which is approximately 257 permits. So we are guesstimating that our total estimated housing units for 2020 is somewhere around 1,986 units, give or take. And obviously we're actively anticipating the census, all the data that's coming out of there. So if you break that down by housing type, that's where you kind of really start to see some of the issues that and challenges that Bolton has with its housing stock. So for our single family homes, we have about 840 units. Multi-family rental units, we've got about 28 units. With that said, there are 70 or so grandfathered in-law apartments, accessory apartments, basements that have been converted, things like that that are scattered throughout, but really a dedicated rental development. We have one, it's Bolton Country Manor. It was built in 2003 and it's 28 units. 28 units. And then we've got our town houses and condos. They kind of fall into one category, and there we have 118 units. So what this is kind of showing is when they came into play and when they were permitted in Bolton, and you can see the only fairly recent development that is non-single family homes is the Craftsman Village development of 30 units. And then I also put the capital A affordable, even though we're not talking about that too much in this presentation. I think it's worth noting, there's the numbers for how many housing units are going onto our subsidized housing inventory. So that's kind of snapshot where we're at right now. Moving on. Oh, and trends, projections, and nothing's in stone, but we did see some interesting age projection data that I think is worth noting for the sake of this presentation. These are just 2 charts that are showing kind of the high end and the low end on the projections of population distribution and the age over that population. So the trend is really that the school age children is declining and the residents over 65 is increasing in Bolton, and by some pretty significant numbers. So as we're moving forward with housing needs and housing types, we wanted to keep in mind the potential shift of our population based on age and need. And again, there we're waiting for the 2020 census data to help us realize more actual numbers that are a little bit harder than these. But this actually came up in the space needs study for the school as well, which totally surprised me that our numbers were declining for our school age children. But there it is, and we're seeing it again here. So I just wanted to point that out. And, okay, so our group, after hashing out just a whole bunch of information, we came up with these major kind of housing challenges that Bolton is facing. We lack a diverse housing stock. We're not meeting the needs of our moderate to low income residents. And we do not have an adequate amount of housing alternatives for people who are starting out in Bolton or people who are downsizing in Bolton. And I think it's worth noting here that something that it can be a very, I would say, beneficial to a community is to be able to keep the members in the town. And so, when you're shifting maybe socioeconomic status for whatever reason in your life, it can be a really good benefit to a community to have options for those folks to stay in the town that they are actively involved in, or sending their kids to school in, or working in, or whatnot. So that last bullet to me is really important, because it allows for some of that shift to happen without people leaving the town, because I think we have some pretty awesome people in. Okay, so that was that. Let's see, moving on. Okay, so survey results, and I didn't go crazy on the survey results, but there was a ton of, to our conversation earlier, there's a ton of metadata, and I did go through all 609 comments just to try to find out, if there were any major pullouts, and this is what I came up with. Our town values open space, rural charm, small community. Those things came up more times than not. 73% of the respondents noted that as part of why they live in the community. And also the open-ended response question, where it said, do you have anything to add about, this open response question was attached to the small community rural charm, why do you live in Bolton question. And so 74% of the 457 people decided to take time to additionally comment in that section. And of those 457 people, 74% of them wanted to put something else in there about quiet, small town, rural feel. And so I thought that was really significant. It wasn't just a click of a button. They went in there and they actually typed and took the time to do that. So likewise, on the next bullet, where there is a need and an interest for more diverse housing options in Bolton, we had a smaller, it's a minority, but of the 393 respondents, 7% of them listed affordable housing as one of the top 3 needed improvements. So that to me was fairly significant, because they threw it up in the top 3. And also in that open response question, where again, people are taking extra time, it's in their heads to put it in there, and it's not a posed question, it's just coming out of their stream of consciousness. Is there anything else you'd like to share? 22% of the people who responded there, which was 238 respondents, mentioned a concern with either their taxes, and it wasn't a nasty thing. It was, really trying to saying this is too high for this. This is a burden for us. And then there was a lack of housing affordability that came into play with a lot of those conversations. So again, it's high level. These are just 2 of the major pullaways from initial assessment of the survey. I'm not going to go through this whole slide, I promise, so don't be scared by all the words, but I wanted to at least have it in the presentation so people could look into it further if they wanted to. Bylaws are basically it serves as a framework and guidance for our development in our town, so they're like super important. Bolton has 5 that really hit on residential development. And of those 5, there's if you look at the dates on some of these, our Farmland and Open Space Plan Residential Development Bylaw is our oldest bylaw. It's also the one that is utilized the most. 318 units of housing have been built under this bylaw in this town. And that bylaw I think is awesome in the sense that it addresses some of what we saw in the survey on that slide before, which is to say that it allows for flexibility in layout and smaller lots, but it preserves open space in the process. And so I think that bylaw to me represents something that kind of works for the town, because there's a benefit to the builder, and they're able to pull down the size of their site, which is obviously economically a good thing for them, but it also allows for the space that they're not using to become preserved, which I think for Bolton is a huge thing. So then That said, the more recent bylaws that we have, even the inclusionary housing bylaw, which isn't as recent, but multi-use village overlay and the barn and stable carriage house act, multi-use overlay is really trying to allow flexibility with retail and commercial space with a housing component. And part of that is a diversity of housing component. And then the barn carriage and stable act is more for accessory apartments. So you're trying to, hit on these different types of housing and make a draw into the town or to a developer to develop them. And so far they're not working so well. So that's not to say, it's not to say they're not working so well. They haven't been taken advantage of yet. And so then the question becomes for the housing committee is how could we maybe tweak these or add to them or create a new bylaw that really does what the town wants in terms of giving a message to developers about how to get the right kind of development into Bolton and in the right places, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of moving parts to this, but at the end of the day, this is the snapshot of what we have and what's kind of working and what's not. That was a lot of words, sorry. So one potential example of a consideration for a new bylaw or an enhancement to a current bylaw is something like this open space residential design. It's similar to a phosphorid. I call it a phosphorid on steroids because it has a lot more to it. But in essence, it's a type of residential development that would conserve 50% of open space, and it would allow for mixed types of housing. And in that consideration, you're looking at things like the natural resources or the farmland, if there's a farm on a development site that you want to preserve. So for example, just for a visual, here's your before. You've got a farm with crop area here. Here's the open space. The whole thing gets sold off, and this is what you get under our current bylaws, with the exception of phosphorid. This is what you get. And so the open space residential design would allow for clustering, and it would allow for multiple types of housing that allow smaller footprint for development, but also takes into consideration the river here and the fact that this farm it has this is like the farm unit, the fields and the farm. So we ironically have a lot of that in Bolton. So it's a wonderful thing. And this would be just an example. We're not endorsing this yet. We're just putting it out there as, levers that we can pull or things that we can look at in terms of future bylaws or bylaw changes. Okay, moving on. Sorry, this is going over. So things we're doing right in Bolton, again, just the here and now. The first 3 bullets there are bylaws that encourage the type of development that we want. These were all voted in on, a town meeting, and there are attempts at trying to steer development that's coming in, because it's coming in, and so we've got to either jump on the bandwagon and steer it or let it just come as it's going to come. And so I think we're doing that right. We have some good bylaws on the books, and we're trying, and we're just looking at improving what we have. Then the next 2 bullets are we're setting ourselves up for to meet our affordable housing goals that we need to meet with the state, and that's again in the housing production plan. But part of that process is having an updated housing production plan, which is in the works, and part of that process is establishing affordable housing trust, which we've had since 2005, and that enables us to have funds in there that can be utilized in certain ways to either acquire or facilitate the creation of, in some way, affordable housing. So that's going for us. We aesthetically, we're trying to, as much as we can, help the developers out with kind of what Bolton's looking for in terms of aesthetic development. That is to say, we have a design review board which currently reviews commercial development projects and gives recommendations to make it fit in more to the town. We also have scenic road designations, which again require certain considerations of the developer in terms of the surrounding area. And then the last 2 bullets are our resources and grants. So we utilize regional resources, we apply for state grants, and this next slide kind of shows that. the first 5 bullets of this slide, and I can speak to any of these, but I just put them in really quick, and I've been talking way too long, so I'm just going to go super quick and say the first chunk of 5 are places where there's money available to Bolton if we write a really good grant, if we or a really good proposal rather, and we've already I'm looking at the MassWorks Small Community. The intersection of Watt Aquatic and 117 that came. We received monies there for that, and then money for stormwater issues in the housing choice community. Resources, Complete Streets, Mary could probably talk to, the community compact. There's money in all of those top 5, and then the bottom 5 are more just resources, things that will assist with, I'm thinking like, I'm looking for, where is it? Utilizing the creation of affordable housing. Yeah, no, just basically any analysis of housing developments or regional statistics, things that you need to consider when you're doing any major planning for the town. So I'll leave it at that. Okay, so essential questions to address. How do we manage new development in a way that maintains the rural characteristics of the town? That was huge. How do we create a zoning environment that attracts diverse projects suitable for first-time home buyers and for our aging population? And then really, do we want to bring more capital A affordable and or lowercase a affordable housing to Bolton? And then with that, we can take questions.
That was excellent.
Yeah, it really
Yes.
was. That was really
Yeah.
good.
Nice job, Sasha.
Yeah.
It was not possible without all the other people I mentioned at the beginning of this, and I learned so much doing this. So super kudos to everybody that helped. And yeah, I'm sorry, that was a lot of talking. I'm sorry, but we would love questions or
Would it be
comments.
possible for you to unshare the screen just so we
Yes.
can?
I can totally do that. Stop share. How'd that go?
That's great.
I got it. Okay.
I had a question, which was, I don't know whether you could tell from the survey responses, but like when people use terms like rural and small town charm and quaint and stuff, do you think that there's a concern or an impression of how density relates to that? Or, because what I'm getting at is like, I could imagine that you could have a relatively more dense development that still had the rural feel and character to it if it like was arranged a certain way or looked a certain way. So did you get a sense of how people felt about that?
No, which is why I think a charrette is so important when we can like get out of quarantine and, you know, put examples in front of people and say, hey, is this what you're thinking, or is this what you're thinking? I think this is such a visual subset of what we're doing in the master plan that yeah, to be fair, no, I don't think I got a good grip on that based on the survey. I mean, people certainly said things like, please don't build up our town, or please, you know, please keep a lot of open space, but nothing definitive in terms of what you're addressing, which is a really good point, which is that balance between wanting and loving and needing open space, and then having development's going to come in. People buy properties and they have the right to develop them. And do we want them developed denser but better, or do we want to, continue with the same, 2 acre, sprawl, if you will? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So the questions that you posed at the end, like the one about, do we want more lowercase and capital A affordable? Like, do you want all of us to weigh in on that? Was that the idea?
Oh, well, and I want Bolton to weigh in on that. And again, I think that's more in a charrette style. I mean, I think you guys did such a great job in the housing production plan where you really call out the need for it. I mean, frankly, in terms of capital A affordable, there's so much that we lose as a town until we've met that goal, that I think that's kind of a no-brainer. The lowercase a affordable is, I would say, is a different avenue to get to that answer. I don't know, Chris, Mark, if you guys want to weigh in, feel free.
No,
Am I wrong in
Yeah.
thinking that one way to pitch capital A affordable housing is that this town is really, I mean, they love the word preserve, preserve, protect, preserve, protect. Okay, so in some ways, isn't it our job to help people understand that if we do have a better plan and make progress on capital A affordable, that that's part of our preserve and protecting? That, I
Right.
mean, we're going to be preserving, I mean, there are properties,
Kind of like,
I drive by certain properties not knowing what their future is and worrying about them, like the one on the corner of West Berlin and Wattaquadock, that Taylor property with a fantastic view of downtown Boston that
Oh,
goes
yeah.
all the way down the hill. And I just think, okay, so what happens if a 40B developer buys that? You know, it's like, what happens then? You know, that's like, I mean, isn't,
well, it depends on the 40B developer. And it depends on what bylaws and incentives we have on the books to
right,
incentivize
exactly.
a certain type of development. That would be my honest answer. Like,
Exactly. So shouldn't we be pitching a lot of this as we need this so that we can protect and preserve parts of Bolton that we love?
I would say the whole thing would be kind of pitched that way, that this is our opportunity to not this specific master plan. I mean, I think this is where you kind of get the high end picture of the big picture, and then you kind of work it down through the planning board for the bylaws, and you work it down through the housing production plan for that development. So it's got there's different avenues, but I think it's the same goal, which is to say development's coming. It's not, you know, we are certainly an appealing community to live in right now. And well, I think always we've been, but especially now with COVID. And, you know, I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I know it's not going to stop happening. You know, people are going to keep coming in and developing. And so how do we want to see that happen, I guess is, and yes, to answer your question, you know, we get a little bit of say in that. So why not exercise that?
Yeah, I think the real question is that, I mean, the town is wildly predominantly single family homes, period. Relatively expensive. You see the numbers, they're $700,000 and up in the last year. So I think for this whole exercise and the housing production plan, as she mentioned, is, you know, we've talked about affordable housing in the sense of two things. A, how do we get to the 10% so that we can have more control as a community over where it goes and what it looks like? Which is almost the reverse of what we're talking about from a master plan, because right now the only way to get some diversity in housing for the most part throughout the town is a 40B. So it really is this interesting dichotomy that in one sense we're trying to eliminate the avenue that has provided over the last 10 years the only more modestly priced housing in town. And I don't mean the capital A affordable housing, but whether it's at Craftsman Village or Sunset Ridge or Regency at Bolton, those are properties that are available for, you know, $400,000 to $500,000 to $600,000, or, you know, these days where single family homes generally aren't. So what do we do as a community if we say we don't want the 40B to be the tool to develop a broader housing range? Because we're going to need it. You know, the population is aging, as she said. If we want to keep people in town, they don't generally, I'm approaching it myself. I don't want a big house necessarily. I don't want a big yard. I want to stay in town. I want to be close to people and things that I've been doing. But a more modest house that may have some services, whether it's a condominium or not, is something that would be really very readily absorbed here in town by local people. So how do we plan for that without having the perceived risk, and I put that in quotes because it's my living, of a 40B that you don't like? And that certainly can happen. Everybody's seen projects that they like and they don't like, just like you see single family home neighborhoods that you say, what a wonderful community, and other ones you go, eesh, why'd they build that? So that's really the balance, and they're very competing interests, and trying to find a means to get that range of product available through traditional zoning. Getting those changes in a community like Bolton is very, very difficult. I know there's people on here that have worked at it a lot longer and harder than I have. And that's fundamentally, I think, the biggest question from a master plan is, in 10 years, do we want to have the same conversation? Because in 2010, I think we had this exact same conversation in many ways. So that's trying to find that mix and trying to find a means to create a range of housing, both that meets people of, lesser means. And, on the one slide that Stacia had, that $400,000 number. I mean, that's based on the median income in Bolton. Okay, that's people earning $112,000 a year. The comfortable purchase price is around $400,000. Maybe 2 available in town, and you're just as well to knock them over and start fresh, as compared to it being a resident somebody, a young family is ready to move into. So that's, to me, really what the focus of this needs to be. Do we only want to service people that make, $200,000 to $400,000 and up, or do we want to expand it? And there was only 7% of people that said affordable housing was in their top 3. So there's a lot of people that are quite happy with $200,000 to $400,000 people, as compared to a broader range. But that's the big discussion from a housing perspective. Based on the variety of things that that we've been bouncing around, both in the housing subcommittee and in the doing the housing production plan with everybody else as well. So, and we don't have the answers to that, but I think those are the questions. So we're just trying to help frame those questions for the committee right now, to think about it from that perspective. The location that you talked about it at, Wattaquatic it's wonderful, it's beautiful. So how do we save those? But there's other areas we got to have some give on, and that's the part that, people don't quite get to in the planning aspect. So.
But Mark, there are OSRD bylaws that would permit a wide range of housing on the same plot if it were carefully thought out, but nothing like we currently have on our books.
Right, and there are a
huge
lot of
change.
constraints working in town as well, without water, without sewer. You can look at a field, or you can look at an area, and everybody could say, this would look wonderful if you did this, this, this. But then by the time you figure out where you got to put septic, where you got to put a community water supply, how you got to break things up, how you deal with grades and ledge and soils, that adds a level of difficulty that quite frankly, it's very challenging to work in I don't want to say in town, but in areas, for mid-sized projects in a community like Bolton. It's hard to do because you very rapidly bump into shared systems or community water supplies, which just create another environment that's difficult. So there are means to do it, but at the end of the day, to get less expensive housing, which is what we're talking about, and some diversity, it's greater density, and that's just the reality of how it works.
Mark, could you put some rough numbers around like density when it comes to mid-size versus larger scale projects? Like how many units would a developer need to get in a project in Bolton for it to be like affordable for them to develop?
Yeah, I mean, when I talk about a mid-sized project, you've got kind of your first threshold from a septic perspective is 10,000 gallons. So if you go over 10,000 gallons in septic, you have to do a full wastewater treatment facility. So you go from a system that could be $200,000 to $400,000, depending on your system, to $8 to $1 million or $1.5 million. Now, 10,000 gallons in affordable housing, at 110 gallons per bedroom, that's about 30 3-bedroom homes for reference, or about 44 two-bedroom homes. You know, you look around, you see, you know, used to see a lot of these age-restricted developments. Magically, the number at 66 because they use the counts differently. Regency at Bolton, 66 units. It gets them right up to 9,900 gallons. It's the largest you can do without completely jumping into a new system. So that, I call that, in my mind, that's kind of up to being a mid-sized project. If you're gonna go above that, you don't go a little above it. You gotta go a multiple of that.
Yeah.
That get viable for that many more units because you got that much more infrastructure that you need to absorb. And the water is kind of an exponential issue in terms of, you know, the amount of area you need for wells and water to accommodate it. But that's kind of the break of what, in, you know, without having water or sewer that transitions, this is my opinion, from a mid-sized project that you can fit in a good amount of areas if you can have the area for water, of jumping to a much larger size project with shared systems, which you really have to do to be able to get the density that you're talking about. So for sale, could be 80.
What kind of acreage does that translate to for that
A lot of it would really, I think it would really depend on, you know, what type of soils and what type of topography. So not trying to be, you know, evasive, but that type of project, I mean, under the 40B, the, you know, Craftsman Village over on Sugar Road, you know, those are 30 houses. The parcel is about 15 acres. They're probably all effectively built on about 7. And some of the area in the back that isn't built on is kind of part of the well radiuses that are required. But over there, the soils are all, you know, wonderful. Groundwater's low, 2-minute soils. They're compact. They're in the ground. Not a lot of stuff to work around. So that's on the small side. And again, that's, you know, kind of a mid-sized project. But generally, I'd say you're probably looking at, you know, 15 to 25 acres, depending on, you know, soils and topographies and wetlands and stuff, if that helps.
Mark, can I ask a question? Because I do think the OSRD is a really intriguing idea for a bylaw.
Yeah.
So if we were to propose something like that, that had a variety of housing styles, you don't typically see that in most developments. Typically it's a cookie cutter. This is one style, that's what you get. Does that add significant cost for a developer?
No, I don't think so. I think having the flexibility is always a benefit. You know, there's some developers that only want to do detached single family homes. That's their business. That's what they're comfortable with. That's what they've been selling for 20 years. They don't want to change. There's other developers that are comfortable, you know, doing a new project every single time because it's fun and different and exciting. But, and then there's people that are in between that are just going to do whatever's going to get them the, you know, the right number that works from a strictly economic perspective. And that's, you know, that aspect is, you know, everyone has to look at that aspect because if it isn't productive, it doesn't work for anybody. But for me personally, and I think for most people, having the opportunity to introduce a range of product of, you know, larger detached, larger attached, smaller cottages, you know, townhomes, whatever. I think more option is good, you know, from a development perspective.
Yeah, because I think from like an aesthetics,
as well.
Yeah, from aesthetics point of view, I would just think that would make a development look so custom. So I didn't know if that increased cost.
Yeah, I don't think someone would do a complete hodgepodge of all those things.
No, okay.
And, you know, certain sites will lend themselves to certain type of product. I mean, a site with a lot of grades, townhomes are very difficult to do because they're attached and you're working with them, where, you know, little cottages, you might have some more flexibility. So just one example that, you know, those types of issues will go a long way in determining what's the most appropriate usage for the site to maximize it, you know, both economically and number of units. And, you know, you'd like to think aesthetics, but, you know, we all think our aesthetics are perfect, but not everybody else's are. So that's hard to regulate too.
Well, I think we need to catch up with Harvard and Randall Arendt and put together, you know, a meeting of a range of people. I was very happy with the presentation and the charrette that we did in Harvard in February of this year.
Yeah, I wasn't able to go to that one. I know Chris.
It was great,
spent
Mark.
a lot
It
of
was-
time on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was right around stuff, and I couldn't make it. But I was other people that said the same thing. They thought it was very productive, and I had seen some of his work and read some of his stuff. So it would be neat to see it. Maybe I'll see if it's on video. It must have been taped somewhere.
Well, Kia, you're looking into that?
Yeah, I've written to two different people to see if they taped it, but I don't know.
I'll reach out to Chris Ryan, who's the
Right, yep.
development guy in Harvard. He's done a ton of really good work over there. So I can reach out to him. I was over there yesterday. So I'll touch base and see if I can find it, and I'll share it with Erica. She can share it with the committee if it's available, or if it's not available, I'll see what I can find.
But to me, the biggest selling point, pardon the expression, of that whole presentation and charrette was actually being there and doing it, and being not forced, with a small group of people at each table to look at the basic tenets of what he had talked about for an hour and a half and actually employ them in taking, a blank sheet of paper with a number of, with a plot plan with a number of topical characteristics on it. Soil characteristics, water, forest, et cetera, and say, how do we do this? And to your point, it was done with a number of different types of housing. There were attached townhouses, relatively inexpensive. They were very nice houses, set back from the road. Some had driveways, some were up against the road, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then he showed us, that's a real piece of land. And that's really what happened.
Well, I think that was the cool part, yeah. And maybe with some of the grants, maybe we could bring it to Bolton. That
Right.
would be a neat experience to have.
Yeah.
A town for people that are interested. So I don't know.
That's actually, oh, sorry, Mark.
No, that's it.
Can I step in on, because you just actually got me thinking of something. I know some of the grants back on that list had to do with public outreach. And so it might be worth looking into, and who knows how that's going to work right now currently, but post-COVID, and I don't know how master planning stuff is going to align with post-COVID world, but whatever that new normal is, but to have, there may be funds available if we were to write in it for some of this stuff to pull Randall Arndt in and actually have something like that. I think that would be a super duper thing to do if we can in our town.
Hey, Mark, I'm sorry. If you're going to be in touch with Chris Ryan, can you check into what it costs to put that whole presentation? And,
I will.
we're going to go for a grant. It'd be nice to know what we're going for.
What we need, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think it was
good.
$4,000.
Yeah.
I read somewhere it was $4,000.
It's not bad, really.
That's not bad at all.
I don't think it's bad at all for someone of his stature for the amount of time he puts into it. So I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
I'll check. They're usually not in on Fridays, so it'll be beginning of next week. So by Tuesday, I'll have an answer, and I'll get it to Erica.
Yeah, that was a dream of mine, to get him to Bolton, and possibly with, a combined Bolton, Stowe, Lancaster, invite other people around.
No, I think that would be great. Maybe something
Okay.
Metro West Collaborative, we could tie them into it. And,
Yeah, and,
have another grant.
both
So,
get them up to speed and get us with a broader perspective on what they're doing in their perspective.
yeah, because most of the towns out here were all, similar with limited services and, really, everyone's got the same demographics for the most part, whether it's, Boxborough, Stowe, Harvard, Bolton, Lancaster, Berlin. It's the same town, really, with some minor variations. But so I think it is something that, probably most of the communities have, they're going through this process. They're having the same questions. We're not a unique town in that, our, longer term needs, I don't think are fully aligning with, with what the population is doing, meaning our, trying to match our longer term housing needs with, the ability to create it. It's challenging. So,
Yeah.
but I think that would be a great, thing to have. And, spread it out to as many people as necessary to make it available and bring down the cost would be fantastic. So I'll see what I can find out about it for next week.
Okay.
Thanks.
Stasha, one other thing occurred to me, and you had resources, both potential financial resources as well as informational resources. Don't overlook MRPC.
Okay.
Montechusett Regional Planning is, we're not part of it, but they certainly have been cooperative. And they provide a lot of information that frankly is more appropriate for Bolton than MAPC is. Although,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I mean, when you take a look, if you take a look at their territory,
What is their territory? Do you know it offhand?
well,
Are they like, I know we're right on the line of a bunch of
and it's west.
okay. Okay.
We're the last of the
We're like,
the west of
depending
the
on
MAPC,
chart you
and
look at.
shockingly, we're not part of it. But
Yeah. It's funny. Bolton is really
has to-
right on the line.
well, it has to do with the Montechusett water area. So
Gotcha.
Got it. Thank you.
one is defined by the suburbs around Boston, and the other is defined by environment. That's curious. Anyway,
Towns get the water to service them, right?
yeah. Okay, well, that does it for me. Thank you very much, all three of you. Stasha, I understand you're continuing to be the heavy lifter, but Mark,
Yes.
But it helps to I just put all the information together. It helps to have really smart people to work with.
well, and it's something of a template for what we discussed earlier about the other task groups.
Oh, well, hope it's helpful.
Yep.
Terrific.
Okay, anything else? Well, if that's it, I like a motion for adjournment
I'll move it.
and a
Second.
second. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Erica. Thank you, guys.